Bob Kovacs, welcome back to the Preconstruction podcast.
Hey, great to be here again, Gareth. Thanks for having me.
It's hard to believe that it's been 2 years since we've had you on. It feels like yesterday we had you on talking about the skills labor shortage and all that was going on in the industry.
Yeah, that's still a challenge without a doubt. But I think we're seeing some traction. You're seeing a lot more articles about people being driven back toward the trades as opposed to being told they have to go to college. So I think in that regard, that's a good thing for that issue. Still a long
Uh,
way to go though.
That is a massive positive. And if anybody hasn't listened to the first episode with Bob, I highly recommend going back. I'll actually put it in the show notes, a link, so that you can have it. But today we're getting you on to discuss the move from the bigger boys down to a mid-size, a bit smaller of a GC. It's always a contentious conversation when I'm dealing with candidates or clients asking, should I just go ahead and bring somebody across from a competitor? Should I bring someone from a lower level GC that wants to go up? Or should I actually bring somebody from one of the big boys down to bring all that expertise and knowledge? So really looking forward to that. If anybody doesn't know Mr. Kovacs' background, I'll quickly go through it. Has worked on the operations side and the pre-construction side, mostly the pre-construction side, for basically a who's who in the industry. Turner, Gilbane, Clark, Evans, Skanska as VP of Pre-Construction, and Hunter Roberts, and is now Director of Pre-Construction at Albion GC down in Georgia. So looking forward to getting into that. So let's start, Bob. I mean, obviously, massive amount of experience coming and working from all those companies. I think the first thing I want to talk about is the misconception that everyone, all those big companies do pre-construction estimating the same way, but they've got nuances and people do it completely different. How do you find that when you're moving a company? How do you find getting into their way of running pre-con and estimating?
I think the big thing is you got to keep an open mind. If you come into a company with, well, this is the way we did it here, this is the way we did it there, and try to force your new company into that, or resist the way they're doing things, that's going to be a challenge. It's because everybody does do it differently. I mean, the goal at the end is to have a pre-construction process that runs smooth, that stays within budget, stays on schedule, and so on. But there's a million ways to get there, and everybody's got their own nuances of how they do it.
Yeah, so there's a few ways to skin a cat, and I think it is a misconception in the industry that if they move company, that the pre-construction workflows, the technologies are all going to be done in the same way, and then you've got to take into consideration delivery methods. So I agree with that. So tell us now, working from for the big guys that we discussed and moving down to Albion. A, what was the attraction, and B, what have you learned so far?
So the attraction was kind of multifold. As I advanced through my career, I was getting into larger and larger projects, working with larger groups and larger teams, and let's just say that the stress of a $500 million project is and managing that and being responsible for it, or being responsible for several of them at the same time, is not to be understated. So it's kind of looking to take a step back away from that and get back to some of the smaller stuff that I'd done at the beginning of my career, and work with a smaller group. So there was that. The other attraction here was because they are smaller, but they are planning to they intend to grow, not triple in volume or anything, but to have a decent increase in volume over the next 5 years. They realized that they needed some of the things that a bigger company has, as far as the skill set that I would be able to bring that they maybe didn't have currently, to be able to advance them to the next level. So the opportunity to help grow a new business. Another advantage was that they're an ESOP. So it was kind of nice to have that, that ownership piece, basically from the get go, which you don't have at all, basically with most public companies, and even some of the larger private companies. It's kind of hard to get, a piece of the ownership. And then lastly, it was close to home. So that always, plays into it. So it's nice not having to drive into downtown Atlanta.
Well, that's it. I mean, driving in Atlanta, I've heard the horror stories, but that's interesting. And the stress part is very interesting, Bob, because everybody just like looks at a building outside of construction and goes, "Whoa, that just looks like a bit of concrete, a bit of a base, concrete, steel, and windows." But the stress of the market and the stress of price fluctuation, skills, whatever it may be, I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of estimators and pre-con managers go away from the industry or leave the industry? Are we dealing with it in the proper manner, or how do you think as an industry we're dealing with it?
I think there's in some cases there's a misconception. We've got all this technology, so everything should be so easy, and because we've brought all that technology on board, we don't need as many people, or we don't need as much time to do things. I think there's some folks that think you push the magic button and the estimate spits out, because a lot of the big firms have all this historical data, and they're able to aggregate that, and that kind of works on the conceptual level. But when it comes time to put a hard number together, before you go to GMP or submit your bid, there's still a lot of work that needs to go into it. And the bigger the project is, the more it is, the more that work is, and the more the risk of a tiny blip in a unit price, for example, being an issue. I mean, there was a project I was working on that long ago, it was 1.5 million square feet. So when the spec on the concrete sealer changes and it's 20 cents a square foot, and for some reason you didn't pick it up, or your concrete sub didn't pick it up, or you didn't think there was going to be that big of an issue. I mean, 20 cents a square foot on a 10,000 square foot building is nothing to even think about. And 1.5 million square feet is $300,000. When you've got a couple of those hanging out there, they can add up pretty quick. So it's a definite stressor.
Yeah, and people don't understand that. Everybody thinks just because you got the concrete, they just come pour it, and it's a simple number. But there's so much involved whether it be delays, whether it be a simple sealer. How important as an estimator or pre-construction manager is that ability to be able to think outside the box and almost question the subs on, have you got everything in this number? Have you got everything you need to finish my job on time and on budget to that number?
Oh, that's huge. I mean, it used to be, if you were doing, like, say, lump sum jobs where you got or hard bid jobs where you've got a full set of specifications, a full set of drawings. The easy thing to do was to call your concrete sub and say, you got the plans and specs, right? Oh yeah, I got it. You got the 3 addendum. Yep, got those. And sometimes that was the extent of the conversation, especially if you're moving fast and trying to get a bid together. But when you've got a project, especially if it's design build, and the specs aren't 100%, the drawings aren't 100%. There's emails, there's addenda, there's different bulletins and directives. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be aggregated. Making sure that all that has been conveyed to the subs and that they have it is a huge challenge. And then you've also got to make sure that what your client has asked for has all been incorporated into that. I mean, we had, let's say, a large project where they were talking about different slab thicknesses and different weighting or weight requirements. So is it a 10-inch slab with rebar? Is it a 12-inch slab with fiber mesh? Is it metal metal fiber? Or is it polymer fiber? And that thing churned around through 20 different iterations in the course of 6 months. And I don't know that at the end of the day, everybody understood what it was that we were pricing. So you had to make sure, A, you had it priced right, and B, that you had a pretty good qualification that says, this is based on a 10-inch slab in the in the manufacturing space with this reinforcing and this hardener and so on, so that A, let's say, make sure you got the right number on the right scope, and B, you've got the right scope sliding into your contract, so that later on there's no question.
Yeah, it's and as you said, that's grand on a smaller project, but on a $500 million project, I mean, to do that with all the divisions, that's a lot of capacity. Is
Yeah.
that why we're seeing more subject matter expert estimators coming into the larger companies? So, like them advertising for a mechanical estimator, concrete estimator, steel estimator, just to get those finite details correct on the big. So,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because those projects are getting bigger, they're getting more complex, and they're moving faster. I mean, another large manufacturing job, they had a huge substation that was being provided by the power company, but then from there it was being distributed to 10 or 12 substations around the facility. And it wasn't unusual for the owner to come and say, hey, what if we take these 2 substations from over here and we move them over there? We combine these 2 and shift them over here. Or what if we use bus duct instead of high voltage cable? And they wanted an answer like, immediately. And if you're not the subject matter expert on electrical, where you can pull something together and get reasonably close pretty quick, your only other option is to pick up the phone and call your subcontractor. And the chances of getting the quick answer or the accurate answer that you need are fairly slim. So you've got to have somebody in your office that that knows that stuff. I mean, I have a a wealth of experience on mechanical and electrical systems. If you're talking an office building or a lab or something like that, I can do some of that stuff myself just from doing this for 30 years. But when you get into huge high voltage distribution systems, and you got to start thinking about what the effects are of that move and the length of cable and the length of cable tray and supports and all that kind of stuff, you got to have somebody who does that stuff all day, every day.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, having that expertise in house, and the subs, to be fair to them, you know yourself, if you've got a good relationship on it's on a big project, you can get the answer. But it's at that early conceptual stage
Mm-hmm.
where they can sit and look at a set of drawings or be in a war room talking with the client and the architect and going, hold on a second, that won't work because of A, B, and C.
Yep.
And is that why you got into pre-construction and estimating? Obviously, you dabbled with the operations early on. Did you see that the most important and the most relevant decisions were being made in pre-construction?
Yeah, that was part of it. When I was right before I made the move, when I was up in New Jersey with Turner, I was in their special projects group, so I was kind of doing both sides. They had you bid it, you buy it, you go run it for those smaller projects, and that's what I was doing. So it kind of gave me the understanding of like if I screw it up at the beginning, that's going to drag through the entire project. If you've got I've seen plenty of projects that were successful in pre-construction that maybe could go, south in operations. I haven't seen a whole lot of projects that went south in pre-construction for one reason or another that pulled out and, and were successful at the end. So yeah, it was partly that, and it was partly, the fact that I enjoyed that side of it more. I felt like you saw more projects go through in a shorter period of time. I wasn't one for getting stuck on a job site for a year. So it was nice to be able to pull a project through pre-construction in a couple months and then move on to another one. I kind of like that side of things.
Yeah, how important was that for especially early development? Because I mean, you always hear pre-construction VPs, directors saying, "No, I need someone from the field. I need someone who understands how a project goes together." But getting both sides very early on in a special projects division, getting in smaller divisions, is that something you would advise a graduate or someone coming through and someone like your daughter? For anybody who doesn't know, Bob has got a daughter who's going through a construction management degree, which is amazing.
Yeah, it definitely helps. I mean, she spent some time out in the field a couple of years ago on an internship, and it was nice to be out there and be able to see what a footing looks like, see what it looks like getting ready for a slab pour or tilt wall pour. Be able to understand. Have that in the back of her head, so when she's looking at a set of drawings, she knows what those lines and notes mean. Is it absolutely necessary? I'm going to say not absolutely. I mean, I've had a couple people that have come through, like straight out of college, and we brought them directly into estimating and kind of grew them through there over the years. But I would say the majority of them, it's definitely a good thing to have. If you are going to bring somebody in direct out of school into pre-con, I think the key is to make sure that they're getting meaningful experience. You're not just having them make phone calls for your bids. Or we've got 2 interns in the office right now in pre-con, and last fall semester, we were just covered up with lump sum bids. So that's what they ended up doing, was just calling subs and making sure that they were bidding and tracking that in our building connected software. But this semester, when they came back, I said, look, we got to give these guys some meaningful work. Because if at the end of the semester they go back to school and they say, so what do you guys do? Oh, well, we had lots of phone calls. That's not helping them advance. So we've been giving them takeoff to do, giving them packages to handle on their own, miscellaneous specialties or something small, and then, making sure they're doing what they have to do with those so that they're actually getting something useful, and then involving them in all the meetings where we can, so that they're seeing what goes into putting an estimate package together, or preparing for a presentation, or putting a conceptual estimate together, showing them what to do when you don't have all the information on a set of 100% construction drawings. So if you do that the right way and you bring them along and give them the experience that maybe they would have picked up out in the field, I think it's possible if you have the right candidate. But yeah, 9 times out of 10, it's great to have at least some level of field experience coming into estimating.
Yeah,
Precon.
it's a common debate. I'm glad you said that it's not 100% necessary because I believe, and this might be taken a little bit futuristic when it comes to tech, but the likes of the modeling, being able to watch the model go together and understand the model when it comes to looking at the drawings, I think it gives you a visual because we're all visual people. It
Yeah.
gives you a visual of maybe not the guys actually working at it, but it gives you a visual of what the kind of the workflow that happens when a project's built on site.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's kind of funny. I think back, one of her first semesters when she was in school, uh, she was working on something in her room, and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm working on my construction measurements class." So, not knowing what construction measurements was, as far as what their syllabus was, my first assumption was this is basic estimating. Learn how to count and measure. And I started looking at it. It was a surveying class, and it was an online surveying class. And I said, wait a minute, you're taking a class on surveying online. Like, when is the lab where you actually go out there and start, setting up the transit and, shooting angles and,
Mhm.
and measuring stuff? She says there is no lab component. I said, that makes no sense whatsoever, because yeah, somebody can hand you a bunch of field notes and you can do the math and have the computer basically spit out the answers, but until you're out there, either freezing your butt off or sweating and actually turning angles, then realizing you forgot to get a back sight when you turned your angle, that kind of stuff, you don't understand it quite fully. So as much as technology is great and the online thing is definitely an advantage for some classes, you got to have some hands on, man.
That's it. There you have it, folks, from the man himself. You need to get out there and do your project engineer, field engineer. You got to do your time, and that's what I love. I love the fact that most of companies actually give a candidate or graduate an opportunity to go out and do all three, and then
Mm-hmm.
even get into the BIM VDC side of things to see what they actually like doing and where their passion lies, rather than people going through their educations just thinking that they're going to become a project manager or superintendent. I love it.
Yep.
So tell us now a little bit about Albion. What obviously you made the move to Albion, Bob. How is it? What kind of size projects they're looking at, and where do you see you're going to add value? Because I think there's a lot of GCs out there would love someone like you to come in and structure what happens. Give us an idea, an insight, a high level insight into what you're doing there.
Yeah, so the company's about 22 years old. About 4 years ago, they became an ESOP, so we're now employee owned, which is nice. They over the years, they started out way back when they acquired a company that was doing telecom towers back when those things were going up everywhere, and kind of bought into that to kind of get into the market, and then started shifting into some municipal stuff. So they got a very long resume of higher ed and public work, and we still continue to do quite a bit of that. Some of it is hard bid, some of it's CM, a lot of it is design build. And I would say probably about 60% of our work is design build, both on the public stuff and on some private. So they got that municipal work. They've got some private work. Like, for example, the big project a couple of years ago was the Atlanta Humane Society's headquarters, which is a $20-ish million facility where they house animals. They treat them, they get them adopted and so on. But then they also have the office space for all of their back of house support that they provide. Atlanta Humane Society is one of the biggest nonprofit animal rescue operations in the state. And they've taken that and kind of gone after some other veterinary clinics and animal shelters and such. Kind of played off of that, on both the public and the private side. And then we've got a lot of other private stuff as well. But the big push now is to expand a little bit into healthcare, not like hospital work, but more MOB, dock in a box type of stuff, some light lab work, and some small industrial stuff. Yeah, the industrial market here in Georgia is still very, very strong, but a lot of the contractors that have done it have kind of gone off into this, million square foot plus project range. And so now there's these little 60, 80, 100,000 square foot projects that are, not as attractive to them necessarily. So we're kind of looking to pick up a couple of those, maybe some self-storage buildings. So the idea behind me coming in was to help expand in a couple other markets, but also help to bring in a little bit more of, that background of and structure that I had as far as systems and estimating formats and how to put together a solid package beyond just a lump sum price breakdown.
Yeah, love it. And as you say, there's loads to do when you're going
Yeah.
when you've got all that knowledge, but it's difficult where to start. And where do you think is the most important thing? Obviously, you're looking to kind of break into those industries, which would be obviously your book of business. But when it comes to processes and procedures and workflows and technology, where do you think is the best place to start and the most important for a company like Albion that's looking to expand?
So we're still small enough that, we're not into, we're not into the Timberline and MC squared estimating type of stuff. We don't do a whole lot of BIM VDC. So that, as much as I've done a lot of that in my past, there hasn't really been a need to bring that over. Um, so I said there's not a need for that, but at the same time, we've done most of our work in Excel, which is still a great great system. I was doing $500 million projects in it. But just cleaning that up a little bit. They had a format that they were using that we've kind of streamlined a little bit and made it a little more client friendly too. So because in the past it was kind of like here's a division breakdown, and the clients don't know what a division breakdown is. So we kind of went and opened it up by trade a little bit. We created some columns to show here's where you were at the last estimate, here's where the new one we currently are, and here's why. It's always good to it's horrible to go into a meeting and say, well, we're at $3 million and now we're at 3.5. The first question is always why. Well, here's why, and here's the reasons in each category that the price has gone up or down in that category. So again, just trying to make it more client centric. Written clarifications, making sure we're giving them clear, concise information. So it's been it's not heavy process changes, but just kind of streamlining some things
Yeah.
based on what I've seen in the past.
And we talked about it earlier. I mean, the big boys are obviously doing really well. The size of the project, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure, private, public, they're just getting bigger and more
Yeah.
complex. So they're kind of distracted doing that. I find that the small to mid-size market is a real opportunity
Mm-hmm.
right now, and specifically design build. It seems like everything's shifting towards design build. I would imagine 20, 25 years ago when you were in the industry, it was mostly hard bid.
Oh
What do you
yeah.
why do you think it's gone more design build now? Is it driven by the contractor, driven by the client? Is it driven by the complexity of the projects?
Well, I think there's been two changes. One is, like you said, everything used to be, just 100% drawings and specs and, hard bid, rip it open and low bid wins. That's been replaced by two things. One is the concept of the GMP, which I don't want to get started on that. We spent 3 hours on, why a GMP is the most ridiculous contract type ever. But, everybody just came to, I can get out early. I can get a guarantee on a set of half finished drawings. This is great. So there's been the projects that go that way. And then there's the clients that understand the value of, instead of I've got a contract with a designer and I've got a contract with a contractor, whether it be, lump sum or GMP or whenever we're, depending on when we're bringing the contractor on, they're not, as much as we tell them to, play nice in the sandbox, they're not contractually obligated to each other, so they're each kind of representing their own interest to some degree. Whereas, the smart clients, there's a lot of them that have said, let me just, get one person responsible for this whole thing and let them design it and construct it so that hopefully I'm going to gain some efficiencies and I'm going to get, on schedule, on cost, on, less change orders later. So I think the clients that A, have figured that out, and B, can do it. There's a lot of municipal stuff that we do that they just can't, they've got purchasing requirements and guidelines and such that just won't let them do it. They have to follow that process. So you don't see it as much on public, but we're starting to see some of it. So yeah, I think design build is great, but again, you got to have a client who understands why.
Yeah, and it's got to be a project that warrants it. And
Right.
I remember chatting to a GC and a VP of pre-con. He turned around and he said, listen, sometimes the client comes to me with a design build idea, and I say, all you need
Mm-hmm.
is a bit of pre-construction services on this, and we can run it that way. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need design build. It's not that complicated,
Right.
And then, but I'm interested in your comment on GMP. Give us an idea. A, do you see much GMP? And B, would you tell us why it doesn't work and why you would maybe possibly step away from a GMP?
Well, I mean, I think we're still seeing quite a bit of it because the schedules are getting compressed, and they're trying to get somebody on board early and get a guarantee on a price early. so that they can hopefully start early and also, like I say, shed some risk on their maximum exposure. The thing that always bothered me about GMPs is, yeah, you go in there and you say, okay, I'm giving you a GMP for say $10 million, and I have a 5% fee, so I'm making $500,000 on this project. But then you're telling me that every dollar I give back to you, and by the way, you want me to work really hard to save you money and buy out the subs and get the right the best price on material and so on. So I'm I'm lowering your cost, and since my fee is a percentage, I'm also lowering the amount of money that I'm making on this project. So if I got a $10 million project, the scope of the project is pretty much what it is. And if $500,000 is what I need to, handle my overhead and profit on that particular project, and I really, wear myself out to save you $1 million, and I get it done for $9 million, I just cut my own fee down from $500,000 to $450,000. Right? Now, some people have, sometimes there's shared savings clauses, but you don't see those. And if there is a shared savings clause, obviously that makes it a little bit more attractive. But if there's not a shared savings clause or the ability to do a fixed fee and say, you know what, it's $10 million, $500,000, I'll kill myself to get the number down to $9 million if my fee is fixed or if I'm getting some percentage of the savings. But, where's the incentive for me to work harder and save you money and maybe take a risk on a lower cost sub, to get your price down, if it's reducing my revenue?
Yeah, and that makes,
but it's yeah, it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And then, well, I'm trying to think as well from the client point of view. Surely there's no real benefit to them if the GC is not working to save you money.
Yeah, no, but it's, like I say, somebody came up with this program. I want to say, I mean, the first time I started seeing it was probably in the late '90s, and then all of a sudden everybody was like, "Yeah, this is great. We'll just give you a half a set of drawings, and you can guarantee the price, and all the risk on anything that got missed is on you." It was great for the client. And I say some of them have understood risk and reward, and are willing to share some of that savings, but there's some of them that say absolutely not. We're not sharing the savings. We want you to drive the number down. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You nod and say okay, but realistically,
Yeah, yeah.
And then, do you see it in many? Is it a particular market that you see it most in, or is it across all markets?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily market driven. I think on the public side, there's not necessarily the ability for them to share savings necessarily. Again, based on their procurement guidelines, a lot of developer driven stuff ends up with no shared savings, or there's some, but some of them realize that if you're going to save me $1 million, I'm more than happy to give you 200,000 or $250,000. So there are some developers that buy into it. A lot of the private clients understand it. The bigger companies, especially if they're doing this because they got a project that needs to get to market. They need a GMP early, and they need to get a an early guarantee, an early release on equipment and everything in order to hit an end date. Because as we all know, those the start dates tend to slip, but the end date never seems to extend out. So they understand that they're asking you to do something a little bit out of the ordinary or take a lot of risk, and they're willing to reward you for it. So.
Brilliant. Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And listen, Bob, we could talk about this stuff all day.
Oh yeah.
This has been brilliant. Listen, obviously there's people listening to this. There's a lot of people, I've talked to you before about this. A lot of people are a little bit weary from moving from a big client or a big company down to a smaller company. There might be someone listening to this that's about to make that move, or even vice versa, go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
If they've got any questions for you, or want to bounce a few things off you, where's the best place to get you?
You email me. It's B Kovacs, BKOVACS at albiongc.com.
Brilliant. Good.
Feel free to shoot me an email.
Yeah, as always, folks, I'll put Albion's website, I'll put your email address, and I'll also put the link to our previous conversation, which was amazing, about the skills labor shortage, which I know that you're doing your bit in getting people into our wonderful world of construction, but also pre-construction.
Yeah, the cool thing is that I think the last time we talked, Skills USA, which is the biggest competition for all the skills, had just moved to Atlanta. They're going to be, the national competition is in Atlanta for 8 more years. So the next one will be, I think, the end of June this year. But yeah, for the next 8 years, it's going to be right here in Atlanta at the World Congress Center.
Right, and I think you judged at a couple of them, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been judging at the state level here on what they call a Teamworks competition, which is a 4-person team that does. They basically frame like a little 10 by 12-ish structure, do a little bit of masonry, a little plumbing, and a little electrical. And then those guys go on to compete at the state level, and at that point, or the national level. At that point, they get a larger, more complex project. But it's about a day and a half for 4 people to frame this thing up and wire it and plumb it. It's a pretty cool experience.
I love it. Yeah, anybody interested, definitely get down and watch it. Or if you're interested in competing, get yourself in there. Bob, it's been a
Yeah,
pleasure. Really insightful. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you on
absolutely.
this podcast again.
Sounds good. Look forward to doing it again in a couple of years.
Absolutely. Stay healthy.
Thanks, you too.